It's a real pleasure to be amongst real researchers who are trying to change the life sciences, innovation and medical device scenario in India. We have a galaxy of innovators and founders on stage. Thank you, Satya, for inviting me and putting me and asking me to talk about what we have done at NIRAMAI and what are the learnings. So yesterday I spent some time chatting with people and so on. I realized, and I made like general what needs to be done, how is innovation, TRL levels and all. But after meeting people, I said, okay, what may be really useful, because most of you are researchers, most of us are researchers. So let me try and sort of share some of the learnings, that I had as a computer scientist out of like a PhD from IISc, and I was a principal scientist at Hewlett-Packard Labs, and then I was heading AI research for Xerox. And then, like many of you, like I just faced a situation that required, which instigated me to quit my job and start NIRAMAI 8 years ago. So at NIRAMAI, we've actually developed a new method of detecting breast cancer, which converts temperature maps to a cancer health report. So the innovation really, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but just to give you context to what I'm going to share later. So we just measured temperature just using a thermal camera, which looks like any of these cameras here, and using a bunch of AI algorithms, 20 plus AI algorithms, we convert this to a breast health report, which can be immediately actioned. In rural areas, we generally directly generate triaging, red, yellow, green, so immediately you know who is need to be brought to the hospital directly, etc. And yes, we have patented along the way. We have 39 granted patents, out of which 15 are granted in US alone. Yes, we have done a lot of clinical studies, which was extremely critical to increase adoption and trust among the doctors and practitioners and users, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how to actually do this in the right way. We stumbled upon, we did wrong, right, everything, but hopefully those of you who are starting afresh or in the first few years of your journey may actually benefit from here. And then finally, we've actually commercialized on the cloud, AI being paid per scan or as an annual license. And so far at the end, this is my intro for the startup part. So now we have partners in 20 plus countries who are just starting to sort of use this, and so it's a great thing to see about 3 lakh women benefiting from this or scanning from here. Goes after the FDA, CE, all the regulatory clearances that are required for the respective countries. And thanks to the ecosystem, we've got multiple recognitions, including last year we were called out as top 20 technology pioneers by World Economic Forum. So this is the short story of where we are at NIRAMAI and what are the learnings. So the topmost learning for a scientist and entrepreneur, especially out of clinical, learning all the clinical piece was very, very interesting. I have stopped reading any computer science books or anything, only oncology and radiology books and conferences I've attended in the last 10 years. Having said that, I think the topmost thing is the clinical validation. It's the most important, segment or function for any startup which is working in, of course, clinical decision support. Particularly talking about AI being the theme of today's panel, this is an important part. And the way we think about it, and maybe it's there in some books also, this is from my own learning as to how the different complexity or different stages of the clinical study itself needs to be conducted. Of course, there's idea to prototype, we all know TRL 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Then we, as AI scientists, we do cross-validation to sort of fine-tune the parameters to the data set that you have in the training set and validation set. And then you would have a test set where you do the lab testing. So this piece is, of course, something that most of us do with existing data, work with the hospital, build the models, etc. But the fun starts, the commercialization or the fun starts after the TRL 6, 7, which was also. What happens then? We have to conduct and see the clinical trials in different stages, right? Retrospective studies, as you know, is existing data, we know the answer already, and then you treat that as completely test set for the people who are working in the AI model. You can understand what I'm saying directly, right? And then try to sort of, predict the values and then compare with the labels that are already known, right? So this is good, but still there is no blinding, and of course you can publish and so on and so forth, but you definitely need to do prospective blinded multi-site studies to make it really valid, where people are coming in, first do your test, predict the labels or whatever, and then the same person goes and does the current standard of care, and then you compare at the end of the full sample set. It's extremely important to look at the prospective blinded multi-site studies, and of course you have to publish, and we'll talk about it. So during this time, you may want to go back and do the sort of the lab testing, change your model. That is a cycle which goes on. There are different cycles everywhere, but this is the most important cycle where you learn from real world testing or real field testing, I would say, in the hospital setting. But if you're trying to address, let's say, an impact or let's say a point of care device like what we have done to triage in rural areas and so on, you have to test in those real world conditions and actual users using it, potential future users using it, right? So when we do this, obviously there's always a bailout condition. The decision may not be made just based on the results of your medical device, but so for example, in our case, if we predicted that this is cancer or not, the current methodology that is used for low resource setting is clinical examination, right? 98.7% of women are detecting their cancer by hand. But still, we said whenever our tool is going on the field, we will also parallelly do the clinical examination, and we don't harm the patients. But you can have them both in parallel and take the right decision for people who are found to be positive by us. So we have to put the real world evaluation in a position or in a setting where the end user is not harmed. Of course, you'll always keep the end user in the mind and not harm her or him throughout the process. And finally, we do the community rollout, and part of it is technology assessment. I know that many of you already are aware of many stages of this, but this multi-stage process is good to think about it as a scientific model. So what are the issues to take care of in these, right? Initially, of course, when you're building the AI model, etc., building an AI model for healthcare is absolutely very, very different from building AI models for other applications, for example, especially when you talk about clinical decision support, right? A lot of class imbalance. It's good, but number of unhealthy people are much, much lower than number of healthy people. For an AI scientist, it's not a good thing because you don't have equal balancing. So you have to use innovative methods of, boosting some of the positive samples and so on, right? And obviously you have small data set. In our case, we actually did not even have a data set because we started off with thermal images, and every bit of the 1.5 million images we have is, every bit of it is collected by us. It was not available for us to download. But even if it's available, it will be very small. So how do we kind of bootstrap with simple models, take it to collect more data, and then so there is also some kind of an incremental build-up of the data set that we can do. To just give you an idea, the first model we built was with just 300 samples, right? And then again, we used it on, in studies and so on, and made it bigger, etc. What is very, very important is also about when you're training the AI model to see how golden, how correct is the label. So typically we take let's say in a medical image, we take an image, show it to a doctor, and use that as a label. Ideally, one label per image is not sufficient, right? We need to kind of, have at least, 3 labels and make sure that there is no bias from the labeler. There is any gap in the expert who is labeling should not be translated into this. So these are some of the things that you have to really take about. In our case, again, we took the biopsy result to kind of, label our data. So it was like really golden truth. And we all, as developers or founders of startups, should remember that there is huge stake for any bias or any error that we're introducing. Unlike, for example, an ad is shown, personalized ad, and if you click by mistake another ad, it's fine, right? But it's not true in a, when we talk about false negatives or false positives. other aspect is the interpretability of the result. So when I talk about interpretability versus explainability, they are two different things. But interpretability is the result that you're providing should require minimal training for the doctor to understand. As much as possible, try to align with the existing framework, existing scoring systems, so they are able to easily align, and utilize and understand the report that is generated. Coming to the validation of prospective real world, obviously IEC approval is absolutely needed even for this. It's important to, in a prospective validation, to choose the right reference test. What is the potential replacement or equivalent current clinical practice that you're replacing? So it's very, very important to choose the right one. In order to do that, work with the clinicians, get opinion of at least a few clinicians to make sure that if I prove that, let's say my test performs as well as mammography, it is sufficient. Is it sufficient? Or should I do more? So we ended up doing comparison with mammography plus ultrasound because we realized that most hospitals do both, right? So that's very, very important. And doing the studies on the population that you intend to make or claim the device to work is very important. And last but not the least, don't forget the CTRA registration. We did it in multiple places. We had to stall the studies, etc. Think about it. I just wanted to get to the practical level. And, oh my God, it came together. Okay. So there are a bunch of issues. I don't know how much time I have, but maybe I'll just quickly flash this, and then we will talk more about it in the panel itself, I think, is that when we're commercializing it, this was more about just getting it ready so that we can go and really try it on people confidently, right? That it has good sensitivity, specificity, and so on. And when you're doing this publishing, I see some of them, of course, we can publish in Indian journals. It gets accepted. You can do conference papers. It's very, very important to get to the top, peer-reviewed publication, reputed. It takes time. We all know as scientists how many rejections will be there. But once we got the Lancet Oncology paper is when at least, 4 or 5 hospitals came forward and said, yes, they will adopt it. American Society of Clinical Oncology. These are the kind of, publication venues that we chose to, and that really helped us in improving the adoption. And explainability is about showing how it made a decision, why the algorithm made a decision. It's different from what is it saying, the why part of it, and making the output more actionable. So the explaining the internals in some fashion, and it's difficult in a deep learning model, but we can discuss how to do it if anyone of you are interested. But showing the internals or explaining the decision process to some extent is very, very important. That also increases the trust in the users and the clinical partners. And when we talk about scalability, I used to be really very, very angry with all the quality processes, ISO, etc. But trust me, it's the most important part which ensures reduced confusion within the company. When you want to scale and suddenly you want to send 10 devices tomorrow, all the different processes are done or something like that. And then, of course, when it is being used in a clinical setting, in a hospital or something, it has to integrate well with the rest of the system. So understand the protocols that are used within the hospital setting, like the DICOM or the PACS system that's using. So design from the beginning to be interoperable, at least when the output is being generated, is it going to sit well in the current system? Trying to understand this in parallel and being ready was important. So when we actually wear the business hat, of course, then we have the issues of what is the business model? How are we going to sort of, charge them? Who's your target segment? How do you go and reach them? And all of it, it's a different class altogether. And of course, the data privacy regulations are different for different countries, GDPR, DPDP, HIPAA, etc. As long as you follow the basic proper kind of rules with information security management rules and anonymization of the right places and having the PII in a different place, etc., you usually will be able to take most of the data privacy laws we see a lot of commonality among these as well, except hosting your data in particular countries and so on and so forth. And liability of results. I think this is very, very important. Who takes the ownership of a wrong result or a right result? I mean, right result is all fine, right? When something goes wrong. So here, like every medical report has clinical correlation recommended, because doctors can, of course, also, it's error to human, right? So there's always, make sure that any report that is generated is also vetted through your legal, counsels to make sure that medical legal counseling or consultation can be taken for your report formats. As well as we actually have good agreements with our providers, basically partners, to make sure that we say that, okay, we take the liability of anything that's going wrong because of our own AI algorithms. But then, yes, we partner with a clinician who would actually sign the report also. So it will have kind of, dual ownership of the liability. So you would actually also have to have a product liability insurance, because anything can go wrong at any point in time, though you want to have like 100% sensitivity, 100% specificity. Yeah, that's rarely possible, right? And so you actually claim only things that your device is doing, and then we'll be able to sort of, provide the right, what we promised is what we will deliver. So that way we can, also hopefully, so far we haven't had any issues with that. So right now we are taking care from the agreement perspective and ensuring that, of course, a clinician partner is actually always a doctor is signing the full report when it's generated into a hospital. However, when you're doing a triage in a rural area, we cannot find a doctor to sign. For screening, it's usually okay to have the triaging done without the signature of the person, because it's only a screening piece. And last but not the least, after doing all of it, finally it has to be equitable and really make sense to implement this. So how is the current status? And when you introduce your device, how expensive is it going to be? Not just for the device itself, are there additional people who have to be hired? So all of this have to be taken into account for the health economics piece, and that there are actually, now we probably know that HTA, there is an India level HTA center. Please apply there, because we actually did it with Kalam Institute much earlier, but then that is not valid when you go for government adoption, things like that. It has to come through the HTIN. So that's an important piece. And then last but not the least is reimbursement becomes more and more important, especially when you go like to outside India, like US and other places, where it's a longer cycle to actually get the reimbursement or a government to pay for it. But generally in India, especially for corporate insurance, people in corporate who have insurances, this basically, there is a preventive pack where any report which is signed by a doctor and has a certain format can be reimbursed. So if you're providing a corporate camp, or you're doing screening for corporate employees, you can definitely reimburse with some of the ICICIs of the world, right? Insurance vendors. So again, happy to give you more info. So it is possible to reimburse for corporate users today, and try and go with government. Today, government doesn't reimburse preventive care, but try and find places where you can give it free of charge to the end user. So these are some of the practical tips. I thought that is what will be mostly useful to the audience I met, at least quite a few of them yesterday. And I want to stop just with one last slide. Though as NIRAMAI, this is a slide from NIRAMAI's side, we are working on breast cancer so far. That particular technology is valid for many other type of cancers and other abnormalities. So those clinicians here, if you want to partner, happy to find ways of how we can use this technology and adapt this for other abnormalities. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Geetha. We have 40 minutes. I can see it here. And wonderful last slide. I think it captured everything we wanted to kind of talk. The audience is apt. Actually, the first session here was also an AI session, because it got, if you heard them, it's a brilliant panel. They're saying the AI is going to be such a big factor in whatever we do, including healthcare research, right? The second issue we have is that this panel has my founder, who is seeing different, of course, he is an AI a global expert, and he's seeing healthcare as well as one vertical. The third issue is that I haven't slept last night, which, which means that I will easily pass on the baton to my co-moderator, Shantanu Pathak. What we're going to do is rapid rounds of interventions by each of you. All of you are founders and friends. Hopefully, the friends part will stay by the end of this panel, because I might just get up and grab your grab your mic. I'm just kidding. But what a panel this is! Just for I mean, you can Google them. They have, I think, amongst them 100 years of experience in AI, even though AI is maybe also 60 years in making, as well from Boltzmann. So let's start with the first question. And every time I ask a question, I would also like, in some way, perspective of global thing. The reason we wanted to do this is you cannot escape AI, right? I mean, at BFI, Gaurav and Pooja will testify that whenever we look at projects, there is an AI component. So Sandeep, for your information, almost 50% of our projects will have an AI component, right? So AI is everywhere. And all of them, including Geetha, who spoke today, and to my left is Shantanu, I should have said there, so it's much easier, are building products with heavy AI integrated into it. So my first question, and please remember, these are rapid rounds. Everything is a rapid round, so 2 minutes each or 1 minute each, and I will game the system here. So rather than going sequentially, I'll just, pick one so that you pay attention to me and him. So the question is this: how are you integrating AI into your products that you are building, obviously, and the problems you encounter while building those products? And this could be technical related or the problems of the ecosystem, right? 2 minutes starting will, of course, go with the lady first. Geetha just spoke, so Laina, you go first.
Sure. I think you can hear me. Okay, great. So just a quick thing, we do brain mapping, and we do brain mapping to understand the functions of the brain, which is then used by surgeons to conduct surgeries. AI is used in various steps of the whole thing. One is we use it, I mean, there are so many when you look at a brain, there are lots of unsavory parts of doing it, which is first you have to strip the skull. And then once you strip the skull, then you kind of look at the video of the brain. So stripping the skull and doing all of that initial processing itself, there are lots of AI methods that we use. The second after that is to build a graph of the brain. That's that's actually one of the most complex things, because it's 42 billion neurons and you're looking at the map of all of them together. So building those graphs is the second place where we use machine learning models to reduce the complexity. The third is to interpret the results. So once you know the graph, you need to look at things like, this is the language function, this is the sensory motor function. So there. And the last is, now if you have to explain this to a doctor, doctors who don't like a lot of the math and the computational work, so you have to kind of put it in their language and have like a conversation with them on what is the validity of this, what's the paper behind this, etc. So a lot of like agentic AI to explain that. So as you see, there are like lots of different steps in which we use AI.
Perfect. Perfect, Laina. You stuck to exactly 2 minutes, so you get some Vimersh points from us. Okay. Gaurav, please note that. So she mentioned graphs. How do you explain to the doctor who may or may not know about AI and the validity of what you are telling the doctor that this will solve your problem, right? Let's go to a friend of mine whom I haven't met in 8 years, and thankfully he took my phone call when I called him, and that is Ravi Bhogu.
Hi, Satya. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. It's such a August gathering. So cut to the chase. I have 2 minutes. What we're doing out here is trying to solve two biggest problems in clinical cardiology. One is patients faint, and second is patients have palpitations. Very difficult to diagnose. So what we have done is we have built a complete end-to-end remote cardiac monitoring platform, which consists of Band-Aid-like sensors that you put it onto the chest, all the data from there goes to the phone, and from phone it goes onto the cloud. And the duration for which we monitor patients is anywhere between 24 hours, and the longest that we have done is about 180 days, which happened last month. For us, we get tons of data, and from an AI standpoint, we're specifically using it for two problems right now. Number one problem is that we have millions of, say, heartbeats that come into our system, but it's only those one or two, which are the problem that you need to identify and identify it really well without false positives and false negatives. And that's what we're using AI for at this point in time. Second thing that we're doing is, while we're building this AI platform, I think we spoke about, how do you develop trust amongst your customers is very, very critical. And one of the things that we need to explain to them is that we're not here to replace, them. It's a tool that acts like a second brain to them. So how do you give them information in a shape and form that they understand that, this is a tool that helps them, is a problem statement that is a work in progress for us. Adoption initially, they were skeptical, but now with the studies that we have published and with the information that we're giving, we are seeing significant adoption, not just in India, but outside India as well.
Thank you. Trust, amongst your customer, that's what I wrote down, very important, we'll maybe touch upon that. Before I go to Anand, I'll go to Nikhil. Nikhil Agarwal, what do you think your startups are doing? He runs an incubator.
First of all, Satya said that he hasn't slept last night. I got a message from at 4 a.m. in the morning, which is the next best Netflix show. So I know you are watching Netflix.
I think Gaurav can testify that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, I work for IIT Delhi, and we are one of the largest tech incubators in the country. 200 startups we have. So the question is not about that how do we use AI, what kind of technologies we are building in AI, and whether our companies are AI enabled or not. The question is that how much data we can gather. Today we are sitting on a gold mine, what we call data in India. We are the largest defense incubator in the country. 73 startups we have exclusively in defense. In biosciences, we have close to 50 odd companies. Agri-tech, we have few companies. Drone companies we have. Now, they are certainly become the AI first company, or what we call them, AI is the blood what runs in the veins. The question what we are asking them is because the models that is developed in the West, they are no good until unless they have access to data. Today, the clinical trials that the Indian companies can do, the amount of data we can access as a usable data for the consumer, which is second to none. And most of the data which is used and which is available to us can be leveraged by the global companies. So India has an opportunity of becoming the playing ground for AI and the future of optimization in the and the role that the institutions are playing have become very critical. So one example I'll give you very quickly about how the whole system is changing in space technology. So the startups in space, particularly in space technology, and how the space technology and biosciences comes together. India is one of the 5 countries which are able to develop technology in space, and Indian startups are defining space sector. Space sector is completely missed by the big companies in India. More than 1,000 companies are today in the space sector, and they are coming up not only in coming up with new composites and materials and energy efficiency and engines, they are coming up that how do we what kind of medical care we require in a space environment, what kind of food we eat in the space environment. And that kind of cross linkages and that kind of data linkages are extremely critical. So I'll stop here and then maybe do a follow-up.
Thank you, Nikhil. So you were saying that a lot of things are happening in space. And we were doing a program with big tech called Edge, and we have some space technology, but looking at cell growth in space, right? So there's biotech and space coming together. Thank you. Let me jump to, should we give our founder the last word, or before that we'll bring in Anand? I don't know. Should we do a show of hands? No, it's okay. Let's do Anand. Anand, Laina and Shantanu and I got into a call. I've noted down some points. Anand, the product, the problem. Go ahead.
Thanks, Satya. So I've got to stick to the 2 minutes and to the 3 Ps. I guess Dr. Rao was talking about 7 Ps. He just given 3 of those. What we work on at Remidio is to ask the question, how do you move eye screening to the last mile? So a lot of these devices that you have which are big, how do you make them portable? That's one part of it. How does AI come in? We build algorithms which are AI on the edge. So that smartphone that you carry actually has a lot of AI algorithms that actually run on the GPUs there rather than the cloud. So what we build are algorithms that automatically detect eye diseases on these imaging platforms that we have built, use hardware devices that are based out of smartphones. And today we started off with eye diseases, and the next set of regulatory approved algorithms that we are bringing is to ask the question, what are the other systemic diseases like kidney diseases as well as cardiovascular risk? Can we start looking at triaging at a population level? So those are some of the newer algorithms that we built. But that's really what we work on the AI side along with the hardware side.
Thank you. Thank you, Anand. Sandeep, we have somebody looking at imaging and breast cancer, connectomics. The first word I learned when I spoke with Laina many years back. Anand in ophthalmic space, cardiology. And actually, you should hear a bit on Shantanu. Shantanu, can you do a 2 minutes quickly? Even though he's a moderator.
Can you hear me? Quickly, so we at Doto Health are looking at maternal and newborn care, primarily trying to address the problem of quality of care or transforming how we look at maternal and fetal and as well as the labor aspect during pregnancy compared to conventional methods, whether there is a fatigue, where there is a skill gap or even availability of tools. We are transforming the way fetal labor and maternal care can be looked at by using AI algorithms to flag risk earlier. Importantly, enabling doctors to make decision using those flags, which otherwise manually would have been missed. So when you look at 6 to 12 hours of labor, on an average I'm speaking, there could be even 18 hours of labor. Imagine 3 shifts of nurses or 2 shifts of nurses are happening. There is no necessarily a documentation that is happening as well. How do you flag those risks which can be prevented? So when 50% of the maternal and newborn deaths are happening during the labor or immediately 24 hours after that, monitoring quality becomes an important, and that's the problem we are trying to solve at hospital as well as at last mile.
Thank you. You also stuck to 1 minute. So finally, Sandeep. Sandeep, you are an AI expert. You are in Dubai. What is it that you are seeing in healthcare and AI from your vantage point? Where do you think the kind of exciting stuff that you are thinking? Of course, we have 7 exciting stuff happening right to your right and left, right? Except for me. What others you are thinking? Like we have use cases of heart, use cases of breast cancer, ophthalmology, and maternal and child health, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So what I am working primarily currently on AI is a little bit more on the, kind of the upstream, as I keep saying, like, upstream work of
We
the
like
AI
that
where.
word. We like that word.
Yes, because, so I basically, the LLMs are all the generative AI is basically all the rage, and, my company or protocol, you can say, is basically trying to tackle this one problem, which we all know, and that's the doomsday scenario of AI, right? So, obviously one scenario is that AI goes rogue and, creates its own intent and goes against humanity. That could be one of the problems. But, that anybody who knows LLM deep enough that, he knows that, okay, that is like a little bit of a, far-fetched reality right now. The bigger reality, which could be immediately very problematic, is that that a very powerful AI is controlled by a single entity which goes rogue or uses it for, wrong purposes. And we are already seeing examples of, in some of the countries where authoritarian governments are there, they are using this AI to have like facial recognition and, putting more curbs on the individual freedom and all that. And, like we can already see right now with the, with the OpenAI, Google, Grok, they are becoming extremely powerful. They have access to the whole data of the world. So what we are trying to do is basically right now focused on creating tooling and the middleware which allows AI to be governed and owned by multiple parties instead of one single party, and AI to be open source. So right now, like, you must have, like, this is one of the most scariest thing recently has happened is that, Meta launched the Llama, model, and due to that, there was a wave of open source AI. So China, copied that model, and they started having their own AI models because they realized that due to this, you can reduce the advantage that the American AI companies, Google and ChatGPT specifically have. But now you are seeing in the last, 1 month back, we all heard like Meta trying to hire $100 million plus packages to individual, experts and all that. And they have now expressed that they don't want to make their model, open source now. So what will happen is that this wave will start flowing in the reverse. Like everybody will stop open sourcing their models. And that will mean that few companies, have the AI with them and completely controlled by them. The part of the reason is that to create that, that core brain of the AI, it requires immense amount of compute, billions of dollars of investments in not only setting up, but then running it also. So there are very less incentives for open source AI. And that's what we are trying to do, that we are trying to create tooling and middleware and stuff which allows open source AI to be monetized and open source AI to be governed by multiple parties. And
wonderful.
Yeah.
Open source is thy name, is what you're saying. And I'll ask a very question later part, just before we finish. And it might excite people here or even in the panel. I will, Geetha, you spoke about, the last slide was great, all of them. Of course, people now know about your product. Which of those 7 that you showed, or 5 and 5, 10, if you were to pick one problem from that you found while building NIRAMAI was taking away your sleep. If you could restrict to 2 minutes, we'll then go to Shantanu.
Yeah, I think I did take more time explaining the breast cancer piece already. So, but yes, trying, from the iceberg picture, right?
From the last slide, yes.
Yes, last slide. So, yeah, so it all depends on who is the partner who is interested, because we believe that we can actually create, first time I'm sharing this in public, we can actually create a foundational model for thermal AI analysis, which doesn't exist in the world today. Imagine, thermal is different because it's radiation-free, non-touch, and private as well, and low-cost equipment. So I think that is what is the power. So now, any disease which is in the organ, which is soft tissue, can be monitored in different ways, because there's vascularity which is seen. We can actually map the vascularity, and we have some new biomarkers we have created. So I wouldn't put any particular, it depends on who is the clinician who's interested in which disease, but we have done in head and neck, skin, many aspects in early studies are looking very, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Geetha. Okay, you have heard them all now from their vantage point, what they're doing. We're clinicians here, researchers, startups, even policymakers, funders. We'll now talk about, I'll pass it on to Shantanu, but just so that the panel knows, we'll talk about monetization, a bit on maybe ethics, regulation, and what do you think India is doing? Is it doing great? What should India be doing to adopt it? So a bit on adoption, and then finally funding, and I'll ask one question to my founder later in the end. So let's start with monetization, and Shantanu, go ahead.
Yep. I think part of the success that we define for startup is also monetization, right? And when investor comes into the picture, that also becomes important thing. So this question is to Anand to start with, and then we can open up for a couple of others. We had this discussion, Anand, where we talked about monetizing, your AI could have a better feeling, but a tough task. But solving that clinical problem is a great thing to do. So how you would like to comment on your experience on better approach or better feeling to solve the problem, but having tough time to monetize it?
Well, before Anand says, you said detection mein paisa nahi hai when we were talking to you, right?
So I think the context in which we were discussing was, I think a lot of us who are scientists, there's a lot we will focus in terms of solving the technical problem or the clinical problem. But the business problem is equally important to solve. And for me, business and impact go together because the more number of people that you're able to reach, utilization increases and automatically you also have business ROI. So the challenge I was saying is sometimes if you think of a test, like let's say what we've done where you have an eye exam being done in a last mile, you'll think in terms of someone paying for that test, right? Now, when you think of population health and preventive health, I'm sure many of you today would love to take a test, but free mein ho jaye to better hai, right? So that's the common perception that we all have. Now, we sell in India and we sell in the US as well. So these are devices designed, developed, algorithms done here and devices done here. So in the US, we sell through the payer ecosystem. So there are reimbursements in place, right? But you have creating a market which is preventive health. So the narrative there is to say the AI is about detecting disease early so that you save money on acute care costs. Very, very simple. You fit into an ecosystem under reimbursements. Now, when you don't have reimbursements here, that's where we said if you're just going to detect, you need to ask yourself who in that journey of the consumer benefits the most as a result of detecting that customer, right? And I believe very strongly that in the early days, the mistake we were doing was trying to earn money on it as a test. Versus we realized out of the 100 million patients with diabetes, roughly around 6 million need something called anti-VEGF, which is a drug that is done for diabetic retinopathy. But all pharma included, including Roche, Sun, Cipla, everyone put together, were able to reach only around 1 million of them. So we said, can AI actually solve the problem of where are these 5 million? So that now you basically are earning from what happens downstream of detection rather than earning from detection itself. So that was the context in which I said sometimes you need to get into the analysis as hard on asking who's actually paying for it. And that was the context in which we talked about monetization.
Yeah, thank you, Anand. And that, just selecting the problem statement and looking from monetization aspect become very important. Laina, your thoughts quickly on monetization.
Absolutely. I think our journey in monetization has been, so we started off with psychiatry. My co-founder's PhD was in psychiatry and how you use imaging for serious mental disorders. And I think as every startup here would know that pivoting really quickly when you know that there's no monetization there is super important. So then we started talking to neurologists and because connectomics as such has huge potential in very early diagnosis of dementia. In fact, much earlier than eye scans, it has been seen. So we started talking to them, but as Anand said, if you detect at year 0, and there is no medicine for year 0 dementia, nobody really wants to know, and it can scare the patient. So nobody was really willing to look at that. So then we started working with neurosurgeons for whom there was this burning problem that, hey, I want to know the functional aspects of the brain while the patient is on the surgery table. Can you help me with that? And when we had that burning problem, we had the monetization. And so that was, it was a journey of a year and a half to get to the point where monetization was apparent to us, yeah.
Thank you, Laina. I think after brain, let's come to the heart. Very important issue for the country. Ravi, if you can comment.
So my experience is great tech doesn't necessarily always translate into great revenue. I think it's a journey. One of the things that we need to understand in healthcare is very complex. You have multiple stakeholders and also not necessarily the incentives for every stakeholder are aligned. So what do I mean by that? Say, for example, if you're trying to make sense to an insurer, okay, so for an insurer, when they save money, it's the provider, which is the hospital, that loses the money. So it is very, very important as startups for us to identify which stakeholder in healthcare you're making sense to, and then to go after that. The other key part, based on my experience, At Monitra Health and my prior experience at J&J as well, is that, markets in India where reimbursement is evolving, it's significantly improved, but it's not at the same level as developed markets. It's very, very important to find a sustainable financial model in which all the stakeholders make money. Okay, it's not enough to have a killer feature, that makes sense to only say either the patient or the doctor. So in our particular case, for example, we work with, say, patients, of course, at the end of the day pay, for the product, but you have, say, distributors, you have hospitals, and then of course there is us. So unless you find a sweet spot in terms of, say, financial model where there are enough margins for every stakeholder in the ecosystem, it's going to be very, very difficult. The other key part that we need to always keep in mind is that when you touch a provider, there are credit cycles involved. So you need to at least keep, say, on paper they say 30 days, but it can go up to 60 days to 90 days. So those are factors that we need to keep in mind, while figuring out the monetization strategy. So these are some of the learnings that I've had.
Okay, anybody wants to do a quick 20 seconds intervention before Santanu goes to the next question? Anand?
Just wanted to add that even from a public health angle, under ABDM PMJ, while it took us around 6 years, now there is reimbursement for eye screening as part of ABDM PMJ. But it took us the time to first work with NHS, show the technology in Kerala then implementing it, then doing a health economic analysis, and from there going to the government, bringing it under policy, and then bringing the change. Yes, it did take us that 4 to 6 years, but I think the things are changing. There is now a framework by which you can do this for all diseases, so that you can also now start doing detection with under ABDM PMJ, there being reimbursements on the non-surgical or non-interventional side as well.
Okay, so there is something about reimbursement that you're touching upon as well. Okay.
So quick learning, it is a learning curve for all of us, I think 4 to 5 years to figure out. And while selecting the problem statement itself, if we can have some additional efforts on understanding monetization pathway. I was reading this paper which came last week on Nature's Communications and particularly about explainability in AI. And when I started reading, I thought, am I reading, AI paper, or am I reading a relationship complexity paper, where, the words, keywords were transparency, trust, hallucination, and naturally explainability. On explainability, maybe we can start with Sandeep and a more broader perspective on AI, and particularly in this case, for a clinician, how one can trust AI, and how explainability can play a role in building the trust.
Yeah, on the product side, like I'm guessing that the output benchmark or the testings the teams have, but I can talk on the LLM level. Generally, I mean, these models do have a kind of tendency to hallucinate. And mostly the way that you try to see the performance of the models is via benchmarks, right? And so that's the primary thing that is used across the globe, that there are multiple open benchmarks, and once there is a foundational model, you try to test it against those benchmarks. Then we ourselves, we have been working on something called alignment internally, which actually talks about, let's say you took an LLM model and you were applying it on a particular healthcare product, right? And what we work on is that the use case builder, let's say it could be a government, it could be a healthcare company, it could be any other company, they try to write a constitution that what this AI should not do, right? Like what are the boundaries, what are the guardrails? Because hallucinations can be, we recently saw Grok saying awkward things about Jewish people and all that. So because these models don't have a way to have the alignment inside them. So you basically, this is an additional form of, after benchmarks you can add some sort of constitutions, and then we have invented a particular pre-training technique, post-training technique, which basically makes sure that the model has additional guardrails as per the use case. And then I think using these guardrails plus the benchmarks is the only way to trust the testability. But once you have something like that on a product, then you can actually evaluate what tangible came out of it and whether it matches the experimental data and all. I think with products it's even better served, but I'm talking on the core LLM level.
No, absolutely. I think That's really important, and thank you for bringing that out. Might be useful for all of us to look at those models as well. Geetha, from your perspective, because you are making a critical decision, and clinician has to trust on either referring or taking next step based upon it. So how do you see clinicians trusting your AI model?
Absolutely important to make the AI explainable, as I briefly mentioned in the earlier session as well, so that there is trust and there is also incentive built in for further action. So it's not sufficient to just say, oh yeah, this person is likely to be malignant, but the doctor should take that seriously and suggest for the follow-up test and so on. So for now, because of the hallucination piece, we are not using LLMs on the last network, etc. But what we have done is with deep learned networks, we have found actually it is again a patent granted in US, where we said is we sort of pull out one layer before, just going into details so that there's some sense of it. So you pull out and then we try to interpret the intermediary feature set for the doctor. Just like, when we actually gave out, for example, irregularity is 0.01 into 10 to the power of -3. The doctor doesn't make sense. So now how do we, so the doctor said, don't give me like this. Tell me something that 1 to 10, 5 and above is positive. That's what I want. So we figured out a way of training one layer before, which is usually unexplainable deep learned feature, but training those as separate machine learning models so we can get discrete features which are interpretable. So this was a phenomenal difference when we actually took it to the radiologist and say, just like you look for irregularity in mammography, now we are giving you irregularity features, shape feature. The amount of trust that it increased was humongous, and they start trusting the final. And also marking the area of likely malignancy. This comes under the explainability. It's not sufficient saying, yeah, this left breast is saying, okay, here is the clock position, here is a dot. That increased the trust again, right? Explanation can come in, like he's saying, it could be, use case dependent. But you have to understand what is that the doctor will feel comfortable about the answer, because they are able to act. When I say marking here, they can clearly immediately do an ultrasound at that location, target it, and you can say. So we'll have to look at explainability in that angle, in my opinion.
So the presentation of it, as well as the exact clinical indication which they can believe, becomes
and
very
it may
important.
require developing additional AI models to explain that as well. That's what we ended up doing.
AI for AI.
AI for AI.
Quick interventions from Laina, Anand, Ravi, Nikhil.
So one is certainly explainability in terms of design. I completely agree with you, Dr. Geetha, there. But I also think of AI as like a very smart intern to a doctor. So you obviously the intern will come up with hypothesis about the patient, personalized hypothesis about the patient. But it's the doctor who will take the final call. And obviously the intern might go wrong in some cases, and the doctor then takes. So it's really a hypothesis generating. And when you pitch it like that to a doctor, where it's more about, here's a very smart intern that I'm giving you who can read all of this data about a patient and then give you some hypothesis which can then help you think further, that helps a lot. So that's explainability to me. Yeah.
So in the ophthalmology space, unlike most other spaces, the way the field is evolved is it's more autonomous AI. Right? What does that mean? You're not actually giving it as a clinical decision support system. So today under CDSCO, we are in class C. It's almost like a drug, right? So in that case, explainability becomes extremely important, because you tomorrow want to make sure that what the AI is detecting, as a result of which it is classifying it as presence of disease or absence, has to be, as Geetha also mentioned, something that the clinician also sees. So there are something called class activation maps by which you look at those regulars. So it becomes very, very important in case of autonomous. And I think it lends itself more explainability to deep learning models as opposed to, let's say, LLMs, where you're going to essentially have the challenge of hallucination, etc. What's going to be interesting now is, as all of us are evolving to, let's say, thermal imaging vision foundation models, we are looking at, thermal imaging foundation models, we are looking at vision foundation models. So I think it's going to be an area of active research where prospective trials, and this is where rather than retrospective clinical trials, it's going to be prospective trials that are really going to make sure that you've done enough based on prevalence to say that you're safe to use, but at the same time, you have to keep monitoring. So monitoring becomes an important aspect. So job is not done once the product is done and you brought it to market. Your responsibility continues on monitoring as well.
Monitoring. Okay, Ravi?
So our experience is that if the AI model just gives an output, like a black box, it's a non-starter. Nobody accepts it. So traceability is very, very important. So if you tell the doctor saying that this is atrial fibrillation, the model has 95% confidence score, and the reason it's giving this particular output is because it's not able to see these P waves, and these are irregular, and the RR interval is also irregular. The tendency to believe and to trust increases significantly. And of course, you've got to go through studies to prove your AI models in terms of, say, to give them confidence in terms of, say, what's the outcomes that you're showing. So it's a combination of these two are my significant learnings out here.
Thank you. Nikhil?
So picking up Sandeep's point on hallucination, I think hallucination is not always bad. Now there is an evidence available in New York University where the researchers are deliberately trying to see the alternative result through hallucination. Because those alternative results take years of trials and clinical study, but through the hallucination they are able to come up with alternative results, and they are able to compare those results with the real results. So those alternative pathways are coming up with a new kind of area of interest and research, and which is in fact cutting down short on, so always negative side is not always seen negative side, but how this negative can be used positively. The another question which very quick answer I will point about from the public policy perspective, which Satya has touched upon, about the India role in being a responsible AI user or AI enabler. So India has been always a proponent of non-alliance movement. I think it's time that we can take this leadership once again, that we can create a responsible AI framework where we can lead. We are certainly not the leaders in developing of the LLMs, but more from the use cases perspective. But the responsible use of AI, because ultimately being the largest country in the world, we will be affected quite a lot if the doomsday scenario comes true. So certainly the responsible AI, ethical AI, the India should take a lead. And that's a role, I think, as a startup founders, we have to play a role.
Okay, ethical policies and all that Nikhil touched. We have 2.5 minutes, and I'm not allowed to go overboard than that. So my last question, and this is the last question to all of you in the panel, again rapid fire. What should India do in AI, healthcare? One gap just mentioned, and what India should do. And because our founder and our CEO, both of them are here, and CEO is not listening to me, he just started listening to me. What should BFI do on AI and healthcare? Okay? So 2 questions, we'll again game it, and the first one is Ravi.
I think access to computing infrastructure is very, very critical for AI. We're currently dependent on Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. If there's a way for us to access this infrastructure at a lower cost, I think it will be a big win for all AI-based product startups.
Perfect, thank you. Access to computing infrastructure. Laina?
Can I say 2 things? One is, I think, foundational models, which everybody has talked about. I do think that if India actually builds foundational models for vision, for thermal, for brain, it could actually be a first across the world, and we can do a lot of things there. And the second, I think, is if the people of India need to actually really benefit from AI, I think the control of the data and monetizing of the data also needs to go back to them. So I think that's another thing that I want to think about. So, yeah.
Nikhil?
India, so the AI is a rich person's game. It's educated people, rich person game. It's a non-inclusive activity as of now. The role the BFI, certainly India is a poor country, a developing country. So one thing as India should do, that we should reach out to the much larger population and interconnectivity. The role of the BFI could do, the AI and the healthcare in AI is limited to certain colleges and certain institutions and certain organizations. The role BFI can do is you can connect interconnectivity with the public hospitals, public infrastructure, so that the ethical use of data collection and dissemination should happen. That is an extremely important, and what I talked about, the India creating a responsible
We've gone
ethical framework.
overboard, so thank you for that. So interconnectivity is something that Nikhil has said. Okay, and Shantanu doesn't get to speak now. I forgot who was the next one. Okay, Geetha.
Sure. From the government perspective, I think we should create a department of health data or something like that, where we're trying to use even the government hospital data coming together, and somebody with proper governance is ensuring that this real data is available for researchers to play with, rather than Kaggle say download, everything is clean.
Is there a similar department somewhere?
No,
in
I'm
other
just
governments?
coming up with it. There is an AI department in UAE that I know. There's a first Ministry of AI is available, but this is something maybe like a data pool across all. But what is available again in UAE is M42, I think he will know better, right? They are trying to get all the UAE citizens' patient data into one and then become the next big AI in healthcare piece, something similar. And from BFI, I think, I mean, you have done excellent work already. I think if you can start funding startups for doing clinical studies, and then because using investor money to do all of it is extremely difficult. Writing grants, is also difficult because, that's I think is an important piece that we should consider.
Okay, thank you, Geetha. We have Anand and Sandeep. I flip the coin and Sandeep first, and then Anand goes last.
Yeah, I think like what India should do already like mentioned very clearly compute. I think BFI can play a role in compute. Indian government does have some AI compute clusters, and if BFI aligns and straightens up this process and makes that available, especially for the healthcare sector, that could be a very big contribution from our side. We should look into that. And second one is the sovereign, kind of the models we also talked about. That especially these large language models also, LLM, they are built on global data, they have biases and all that, and due to which I think the ability of Indian government to allow them at large scale will always be diminished. So either we should, India should build a sovereign model from scratch, or it should, kind of invest in building the alignment, that guardrails, which puts the India constitution or India related things or those sensitivities in terms of the LLM models. And I think the third thing that, Geetha ma'am said that, about the data, I would say about like clarity on the legalities on the data is even more important. Like data is especially something I'm looking very deeply in India and in healthcare also, and otherwise. But the data laws are very, very, still very confusing and tedious to, clarity on that would also be very helpful.
Perfect, thank you. Compute clusters, then sovereign models, and creating guardrails and all of that, and clarity about legality of data. Okay, thank you for that, Sandeep. Anand?
So I'm going to bring
Anand,
it more
we're
from
running against time, so 30 seconds.
quickly. See, we were at a time where we were up against Google as competition, right? When we were bringing our AI out, and we succeeded because we were in India. And what do I mean by that? The quality of data that you get here, the clinical cohorts that you have, they developed algorithms there, brought it to India, but it couldn't work because they worked on pretty pictures. We had to take it on real world. So what you have in India is a lot of real world data. That is really going to give us the strength to be able to do something. It's always good to work under constraints, build something that is highly innovative because of the constraints, and then it works everywhere. It also worked very well when we went outside India.
Wonderfully put. Such a dichotomy. We're talking about AI and real world in the same sentence, but great point. Thank you. I think we've gone over 3 minutes and 40 seconds. I'm not to be blamed for that. But big round of applause for our panelists.